Rick Collins, and today I've got Shereen Williams of NBC's Pro Football Talk and Unified Contributor, and this is Off the Bench. Shereen, we have you in here because yesterday it came down, Zeke suspension. What's going on? There was a block, an injunction put in place to keep the suspension from occurring, and now the court's ruled against that. So will he serve his suspension starting next week?
Well, right now it looks like it, but he and his team do have legal options, several legal options that they could pursue. And of course, the NFL has a federal lawsuit pending in New York that he could go there and seek another injunction to block the suspension. So several moves left to be played in this. As I've said all along, this is something that's going to be resolved in a matter of days or weeks or months. This is going to, it's gone on, shoot, we're over a year now. Yeah. I mean, this thing has just gone on and on and on. And it's going to continue to go on. So whether he serves it or not, I don't know. As of right now, he's suspended, but they're on a bye week. So what happens next week, stay tuned is what I would say.
Does he get to practice with the team at the facility? So he's got to do his own workouts and everything for the next probably at least a week would be my guess, right?
Yeah, unless they get a quick resolution to this thing, you know, with another temporary injunction, and I don't see that happening. I think he'll probably be suspended at least 1 week, which is the 49ers game, and then could be back for that next week, depending again on what the courts decide, which we just don't know. It's just hard to speculate because you just don't know how these judges are going to rule, and it usually follows lines. So the Republicans judges usually are going to go on the side of management, which is the NFL, and the Democratic judges are usually going to go on the side of the employees or the players. And that's what happened in this case. It was a 2-1 decision in the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court, and it was along those lines. 2 Republican judges ruled for the NFL, and 1 Democratic judge ruled for Ezekiel Elliott. And so there's just, you can't predict what they're going to do. But I would say he probably is going to serve, based on the amount of time he has to get a decision, I would bet he's going to serve at least a 1-game suspension with the San Francisco game next week, and then maybe he gets his injunction to come back the week after.
So if you got him on your fantasy team, you might want to sit him next week and then keep him on your roster, though, because we don't know what's going to happen after that. You don't want to drop him, he comes back, and then somebody else pick him up. What happens with the Cowboys, though, moving forward? Because they have to really start planning for somebody else as their starting running back. And outside of Zeke, Zach is their best rusher. And then with running backs, they only have 10 rush attempts with their other running backs. So guys have not gotten enough play time outside of Zeke to, for them to really have an idea of what they're going to do. What would your expectation be?
This is going to be different for Scott Linehan, the Cowboys offensive coordinator, because if you look back, he's always liked that lead rusher. You go back just a couple of years, 2014, DeMarco Murray led the league in rushing, and he used him kind of as a lead back. 2015, their intent was one thing. It was to use Joseph Randle in that role. We know what happened to him, and it ended up being Darren McFadden. But McFadden did rush for over 1,000 yards, and then they came back.
One of his best seasons.
Absolutely. He has 2,000-yard seasons, and that was one of them. And then they came back and drafted Ezekiel Elliott, and now he's been their lead rusher the last 2 years. And you mentioned 3 guys that the Cowboys can use, and that's Rod Smith, who is Jalen Smith's brother, a fullback-tailback combination, Alfred Morris, and Darren McFadden. Now, McFadden's been inactive for all 5 games. The other 2 guys have combined to play 29 offensive snaps. So the 3 of them have combined to play 29 offensive snaps in the first 5 games. So back to your point, we don't know. They have 11 total touches, as you said, the 10 rushes. And we do know Alfred Morris had that 70-yard run, a career long against the Rams, but I think they have 89 total yards among them this year in rushing yards, and 70 came on that one play. I do think Alfred Morris is their best running back, emphasis on run, but he cannot handle third downs. He's not good at blocking, he's not good at pass catching, which creates sort of a problem for them, in that they're going to have to use somebody else in that role, which is probably Darren McFadden. Rod Smith's probably the most capable of it, but who knows, because he hasn't played much in his career, in his entire career.
Yeah, and I wonder if you see more, maybe we see Ryan Switzer in a kind of a Christian McCaffrey role that Carolina's been running him out of a wing formation, and running the ball, maybe some of those little shuffle passes, things like that. That would get the running game going without Zeke. Now, the problem with that is that would completely change really the offensive system that they've had so far. But can they run the same offensive system without Zeke?
I think they're going to try to. Whether they can or not, I don't know. You know, that offensive line, it's one thing that really hasn't been talked about so far this year, but it has not been as good as in the past. And I think we all kind of sort of expected that with 2 changes in the offensive line, but I think people are now seeing, too, how much Doug Free was underappreciated at that right tackle spot, because he was solid there. As much criticism as he got, he was solid at right tackle, and now you've taken Lyle Collins and moving him from left guard to right tackle and inserted a couple different left guards in there that you've had this year because of injuries with Chaz Green and Jonathan Cooper. And that offensive line just has not been as good. And not only have the 2 changes affected it, but I don't think those other 3 guys have been as good. I think Tyron Smith, maybe it's because of his back issues, I don't know, but I don't think he's been as good as he's been in the past. And that's a problem for this team. As you said, if you're going to keep the same offense, that offensive line is really going to have to block well and provide some holes for those guys to run through. And so far this year, we haven't seen that.
Yeah, and the guys that they would be bringing in to replace Zeke aren't the kind of guys that are going to get through some of those smaller gaps that they've had this year. Not nearly as big a holes as they were able to create the last couple of years. Now, they don't play this weekend. They've got a bye weekend. I think part of the reason we're hearing about this ruling this week was because they're at a bye weekend, and that gives Zeke's team a little bit more time to go and try and get an injunction again. We missed on last night's game. We are, in division rivals right now, the Philadelphia Eagles. They won again. And Carolina at home wasn't as good as I think a lot of people expected in this game. Cam Newton struggled a little bit in the passing game, and it showed how good Philadelphia's defense was. What do you think about this Philadelphia team so far this year?
They get better and better and better every single week. And I think one of the things, and I think we've talked about this before, is offensive line play in the NFL is not very good overall right now. This Eagles offensive line, when they're intact, Lane Johnson, the right tackle, didn't play, maybe the best right tackle in football, but he didn't play last night because of concussion. But I think this offensive line is pretty good, one of the better ones in the NFL. Their defensive line absolutely is one of the better ones in the NFL. I think they showed it last night with Fletcher Cox being back in there, and the way he pushed that pocket from the middle was just a dominating force. And I think if you have offensive line and defensive line, Bill Parcells will tell you you're pretty good. And I think that's what they got. And then you got to have the quarterback. And Carson Wentz, to me, just keeps getting better every week. And
one of the things we looked at was how good Dak was when the offensive line was great.
That's it.
And now you see what Carson Wentz is able to do when their offensive line is healthy and great, which they are right now. And he's been phenomenal so far this season. In fact, I believe he's top 3 in QBR on the season. A lot of young guys up there at the top this year. It's Dak, Carson, and Deshaun Watson. So impressive to see some of these younger guys, and I think a lot of it has to do with the offensive line. And they've, despite Lane Johnson being out, he'll be back next week for them. And they're only going to get better on their offensive line getting him back. So I don't expect them to slow down. I think it's going to be difficult now for the Cowboys, especially if Zeke is suspended for an extended period of time, for them to play catch-up.
Well, and they'll have to play, if he is suspended for 6 games, they'll have to play one of those games against the Eagles without Zeke. Think about this, though. I wrote this yesterday, but the Cowboys' record's 2-3. He would have served 5 of the 6 games. I understand why he's fighting, and I'm just making a point here. He would have already served 5 games. They'd be 2-3 anyway. In my opinion, they would still be 2-3. They would have beaten the Giants without him, and they would have beaten the Cardinals without him. I think they would have lost the other 3 games without him. They'd have the same record. You'd have him out one more game against the 49ers, and then you would have him coming back, and you would have him for the rest of your division games, having already beaten the Giants. But now you're not going to have him for that as it stands right now. And so to me, that's a huge thing that's kind of been overlooked, is they went 2-3 with him. They weren't very good. And they do play the Eagles twice coming up. But
must wins at this point.
Must
it seems
wins,
like,
but
yeah.
do we have any faith at all the Cowboys are going to beat the Eagles, especially if they have to play the one game without Zeke?
I think it's going to be a really tough road to hoe. And even the Giants, I don't know. Can we go and play the Giants with a beat up offensive line at that point because we don't have a running game, right? And then a defense that with some of the injuries and the youth that we have there, I'm not sure that our offense is going to be able to keep the defense off the field. We may have a pretty beat up defense by that point. I'm not sure we go and beat the Giants. I mean, if the Giants get healthy, we may struggle at that point.
I think the Giants have quit, but
and the Redskins are a great team. I think this division is probably a little bit underrated overall. I think the NFC North is maybe a little bit overrated, but the Redskins are playing well also. I think it's going to be a challenge for the Cowboys to win the division. They may be looking at a wild card at this point, and even that may be a challenge with how well Washington's playing.
I do think it's a challenge. No question about that because of where they sit and where the Eagles sit right now with only one loss and the Cowboys sitting there at 2-3. But they do play them twice again or still play them twice. And I do think they have a chance to beat the Redskins. I don't think the Redskins are all that good. I think they're playing better than the Cowboys are right now, don't get me wrong. But I think the Cowboys have a legitimate chance to sweep the Redskins if they can turn it back around.
Well, the Cowboys have had a tough schedule too, and that was part of the reason why you wanted Zeke to take the first 6 games is because you looked at the schedule and said a lot of these games might not be winnable anyway. You know, expecting them to be 2-3, and if Zeke had sat, like you said, for those games, we probably had the same schedule, and then we get Zeke back healthy and rested, you know, to go the rest of the season.
But think about this: they're one play away. So if they had won the Rams game, which they were way up at halftime, if they had held on against the Packers or not given it, if they were sitting here 2-3, I think we'd have a different opinion of them. And frankly, it's just one play in one of those 2 games, and we're sitting here going, well, they're 3-2, they're still in the thick of this thing. So my point is here that there's still a really long way to go, but I think everything that's hit them, you think about what's happened for them this week in their bye week, coming off the loss to Green Bay, a heartbreaking loss, and then they have Stephen Paella retire. They cut Nolan Carroll. The Zeke news comes out, and then we had Jerry with his post-game comments that we've had meetings all week about with the players. And so, you know, all this has happened on their bye week. So to me, this just doesn't seem like a team that is in sync and on track and going, okay, we're 2-3, but this seems like a team to me that's going, we're 2-3, we're in trouble.
Yeah. What other games do you look at this weekend and see a lot of interest? One of the games I was looking at is the Patriots against the Jets.
Yeah.
Both teams are 3-2. They're tied for the division lead. The Patriots had a wake-up call last week, and I really think, I mean, they could have lost that game against Tampa Bay easily if Tampa Bay has any sort of kicking game whatsoever. That was a wake-up call that offense really has to get things together because Tampa Bay's not an amazing defense, and the Jets bring in a very good defense. This could be a trap game for them. I think they're going to struggle against the Jets offensively, and their defense better come with it because McCown has been good so far this year.
Yeah, the Patriots just aren't what they have been. Now, they have a long break. They're coming off a 10-day break because they did play that Tampa Bay game on a Thursday night, which is going to help them. And usually we see teams rebound and play pretty well after a long break like that. And so I expect the Patriots to come out and do that. And I never count out Bill Belichick or Tom Brady for obvious reasons. I always figure they're going to get it together. But this isn't the same team that we've seen in the past. This defense isn't the same defense that we've seen in the past. And I do expect that they've made changes. They did look better on defense against Tampa. Before the Tampa game, they were on pace to be one of the worst defenses, scoring defenses in NFL history, giving up over 500 points. And you can't do that and win a Super Bowl and be in contention. And they know that. And they did make some changes in that game, and we'll see if how those changes continue to help this football team. I do expect that they'll help them some, but there's only so much you can do when you don't have the talent. And I'm not sure they have the talent on that defense. But it is a very interesting game. I don't think any of us thought we'd be thinking that coming into this week 2 or 3 weeks ago. But it is a very intriguing game to see we all thought the Jets were tanking,
Yeah.
trying to get the #1 overall pick, and here they sit.
They're going to struggle to get that #1 overall pick at 3-2.
I think they're done with that. I don't think they're going to get that pick now. They've won too many games.
Also, look at so San Diego playing up in Oakland.
Yeah.
They've got a problem right now because of all the forest fires going on in California. They're talking about air quality issues. They're still scheduled to play there, but if they have a problem, one of the interesting things I saw was they might go to Qualcomm. So the Chargers might play an away game at their former home facility. What would that be like for San Diego?
Well, I was curious because what no one's reported, and I haven't checked on this yet, because I did talk to the NFL yesterday about what they were doing, how they were monitoring the situation. But one thing that struck me is there is a replay system, and in the past you could not play games outside of an NFL stadium, which that is no longer an NFL stadium. So I don't know if it's even possible for them. I know people have thrown that out there, but I'm not sure that the NFL would allow them to play there because of their replay system that they have in place now. It may be different now. I know that was the rule in past because they're using the Microsoft tablets now. So it may be different now, but that was one thing that struck me. Was it even going to be possible for them to use that stadium?
And they could end up playing at Levi's anyway. It's a lot closer.
Well,
Santa Clara makes a little bit more sense.
I think they're going to have the same air quality issues. It's only 35 miles south. I mean, they still have air quality issues in Santa Clara. I think if they're going to play the game in the Bay Area, I think it's going to be played in Oakland. I don't think they'll go to Santa Clara. I do think they want to play the game in Oakland. It's just they're not going to play it if it's unhealthy air. And the Environmental Protection Agency lowered their air quality rating the past couple of days. I mean, the air is just not good, and it's affected the Raiders' practices. They stopped some individual stuff. They moved their practices to earlier in the morning to try to avoid some of that. But the air quality just is not good there right now. And if they can get these wildfires, I know they can't get them totally under control, but a little bit under control, the air quality will improve, and they'll play that game there. But they're going to have to make a decision here, I would say, pretty quick to
I mean, they're waiting to the last second here because of travel and everything else. They've got to make a decision on this pretty quick. That is by far the most interesting thing I've ever heard, potentially delaying or postponing or changing the venue of an NFL game. I never heard of air quality.
We haven't had air quality before, but we have had several things that have moved football games. And, you had earlier this year, we were talking about moving possibly the Texans and Jacksonville, and we had the Tampa-Miami game.
A lot of games in college football canceled.
A lot of college games. So we've had the hurricanes affect them, and now could have wildfires affect an NFL game.
Yeah, and more college football after the break. We've got the Red River Rivalry Showdown here in the DFW area at the Cotton Bowl.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
Back with Shireen. Now we get to talk college football, and obviously one of the biggest games in the area every year, the Red River Rivalry Showdown, finally here. OU coming off a really, really tough loss. I mean, they were looking at a college football playoff position, and now it might be a struggle for them to get back into it. Texas having a very tough year, trying to figure out who their quarterback is and what they're going to do on offense. What's your just initial position on this game? What do you think is going to happen?
Whether you're an OU fan or Texas fan or not, which I'm not fans of either one of them, but you watch this game. You want to see what happens. It's a rivalry. I think we all watch these rivalry games, and this is one of them you put on your calendar. I'm going to be in front of the TV at 2:30 on Saturday to see how this game plays out.
It's like the Thanksgiving Day games,
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter who's playing. I'm going to sit down and watch the entire thing.
Yeah, and so I think we're all looking forward to seeing, is OU going to rebound? Even Texas during their struggles over the past 4 years has played OU really well and beaten them. And so I think we all expect this to be another close game like they've been over the past few years and like they've been over most of the
2012 was the last time that it was a blowout, and it was Oklahoma beating Texas in 2012. But the last 5 years, it's been Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Could Texas pull it out and continue that trend?
Their defense has played awfully well, better than I expect them to play. I think it's going to boil down to the quarterback. Yeah. Tom Herman hasn't named a quarterback. I think we're all betting that it's going to be Sam Ehlinger is going to be out there playing, and he's done a pretty good job for a freshman, but he's still a freshman, playing in his first Red River rivalry, and that's tough to say.
The tongue twister.
Yeah, but playing in his first one of these and a really big game for him, and we'll see how he plays in that. Now, he did start against USC, who was number 4 at the time, and handled that pretty well, but, he had the fumble at the end of the game and a couple big turnovers, and I think OU's going to probably try to force him into.
And I think the expectations of him were not extremely high going into the season because a lot of people expected to be Buechele, despite the fact that nobody thinks he's Tom Herman's quarterback of the future. I mean, a lot of people are thinking Buechele's probably going to transfer after this year. And Ehlinger, I think it's good that it's been a little bit of back and forth because he hasn't felt the full pressure of the season on him. There aren't high expectations of this team, but he's played well.
Yeah.
I mean, as a freshman quarterback, I think he's played about as well as you could expect a guy in his position to be playing. I think it's going to be him this week, and I'd be so surprised if it's Buechele. I think it's Ehlinger's season to lose at this point. If he plays terrible, you may see Buechele again, but I think if he's competent through the rest of the season, I don't think we'll see Buechele again.
Unless he gets hurt.
Yes, unless he gets hurt. That's true, yes.
That all bets are off,
Now,
which is how he got the job really kind of in the first place.
That's right.
With Buechele's ankle injury.
Yeah, and even when Buechele came back, there wasn't a convincing argument made for Buechele to be the starting quarterback when he was healthy. OU's defense, I think, is the biggest question in this game.
Yeah.
When they have not played well, they have put a lot of pressure on Baker Mayfield to win games for him. And this may not be a game where if they play poorly, Baker Mayfield's going to have that availability to him to win this game because Texas' defense is much better than some of the defenses they've seen so far this year. What do you think about this OU defense right now?
Oh, my Lord. It's terrible. And I think we
Iowa
saw
State
that in
running up on them.
We saw that in the Iowa State game, how bad this defense was. And that has been their problem and is their problem moving forward. If they want to get back in this thing, they need to win this game. And, if Baker Mayfield wants to get back in the Heisman conversation, it's my personal opinion. I know people still have him up there, but I don't see him winning the Heisman now based on what they did against Iowa State. Whether it was his fault or not, it doesn't really matter. You have to take a program really and get them up there in the upper echelon as a quarterback. And unless he does that the rest of the way, they need to go undefeated. I think he gets back in that conversation if they do, and this team gets back in the national championship conversation. Again, it's going to be hard because the conference they play in just doesn't have a lot of respect. Let's be honest about it. And so it's tough. You really need a team.
They go undefeated the rest of the season, and it's still going to be a challenge for them to get up there. You really had to be undefeated. TCU's really got the best shot right now.
They do. TCU has the best shot.
And they still may not get in as an undefeated team.
We've seen that before with TCU.
Wouldn't be surprised because the Big Ten has come back in a big way in the last couple of years. The ACC is looking phenomenal. And the SEC, of course, is always going to have at least one team in. Alabama. And they may end up getting 2 teams in. I mean, if Georgia rolls for the rest of the season, even if they get 1 loss, I wouldn't be surprised to see them in it.
Good point.
So.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Oklahoma to get back into this thing, but you start now.
Yeah,
and
they've
you
got
get
to start hammering the rest of the teams that they play.
And it starts this week with this rivalry. First time since 1947, I believe it was, that they both have first-year coaches, which was interesting to me. Lincoln Riley at OU and, of course, Tom Herman at Texas, and both of them trying to get their programs rolling forward and establish what they want in their programs, and it's probably going to take a little bit based on what we've seen this year for these two to build, but it's interesting that they're both getting their program started in the same year, and we'll see who outlasts
it seems
who.
like Lincoln Riley has a lot more talent and depth on his team going forward, especially youth. Herman, it's going to take another recruiting class for him to really get the guys in that he wants. I think he's going to be lucky, though, to have Ehlinger back next season.
Yeah.
And that's going to help him progress. I think this Texas team gets a lot better next year than they are this year. I don't know if they're going to compete with TCU in Oklahoma next year, but they're going to be a lot closer than they are this year. I see them still as more of a middle of the pack team. Next year, I think they're a top 3, maybe they're top 4, but I think at least top 4 team next year in the Big 12.
Yeah, and he needs another good recruiting class, and we keep saying that about Texas, and at some point, Longhorn fans, you know, hopefully you're going to have a good team.
Well, I mean, they brought him in because he was good at recruiting, and if he's at Texas, it's a big enough program. If he can't recruit, then
Texas,
he's not
he's
not a Division I.
You got to pick the right kids and get those in, and you're going to get pretty much who you want. You just got to pick the right kids when you're at Texas. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
You can get pretty much the pick of who you want, but you got to make the right picks and the right choices.
And they haven't been doing that for the last 10, 15 years almost.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since they really had class after class after class that were top 5, top 10 recruiting classes.
The last time they won the national championship, I think right after that, and then it kind of tapered off, and now we've had this change in coaches and this change in kind of culture with what's going on at Texas. But you know, I think he'll do well there. I think he'll recruit the right kids and get that thing in place. But, you know, it's never easy for fans, especially at a program like Texas, when you believe you should be winning year after year, and now they've been in this long drought.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting game this weekend. These games are always entertaining at the least. And, of course, it's at the State Fair, so we're going to get to see all the ridiculously high caloric fried foods that they've brought out this year. I've heard there's like a deep fried queso hamburger or something. I mean, crazy stuff.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
We're back. Thanks to Shireen for coming in and talking NFL and college football with us today. State Fair, it's a big weekend to go to the State Fair, maybe go to the game. Right now, though, we need to talk about what's happened in the last 24 hours. The Chicago Cubs prevailed. I did not have them winning that game. I had Washington, so my prediction has failed this time. Next time I'll make sure I get it right. Kendricks, though, was not convincing as a starting pitcher for the Cubs. Let's just say they're going to be lucky that Kendricks probably is not going to be available for the first at least 2 games of the NLCS against the Dodgers, and that's fortunate because it's going to be Lester and Quintana who are going to be pitching more than likely against Kershaw and Yu Darvish. Once you get past Kershaw and Yu, Hill is a good pitcher, but he's not Kershaw or Yu. So, you know, once they get to that 3rd spot, Hendricks pitching against Hill I think is a better matchup for him. These first 2 games, though, for the Cubs are going to be very challenging against Kershaw and Yu. You've got to get at least 6 innings from Lester and Quintana for them to have a chance in those games. Then Yankees and Astros starting up the ALCS tonight. I think it's a great matchup. It's going to be really exciting. I think it's going to be a home run derby. I think there's going to be a lot of home runs, a lot of runs scored in this series. I think tonight's matchup of Tanaka against Keuchel is going to be a great one. Keuchel has a lot of success against the Yankees, but it is Friday the 13th, and you never know. I mean, it's October, Friday the 13th, anything can happen. Should be a home run, happy series, as I said, and I expect the Astros to end up winning the series. I think it'll take at least 5 games. I wouldn't be surprised with the Astros on top, though. Mavericks, very disappointing news after last night's game. Now, we don't know the extent of the injury, but Dennis Smith Jr. Sprained his ankle. We don't know if it's a 3rd-degree sprain or just, you know, a rolled ankle, and they just didn't want to put him back in to risk any further injury. So we'll keep you up to date on that injury, but that leaves a bit of a hole. We've got guys that can play point guard. Harris and J.J. Barea could certainly step in and fill in for him. But last night, Gene Clavel came in, played extremely well. 19 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. Is he a guy that can make the roster? I think so. But does he get any game time? Obviously, these numbers are not against the top players for the Atlanta Hawks. Can he come in and play in a regular season game and play as well as he has so far in the preseason? I think that's a much different and bigger question. I would expect to see probably JJ starting some of these games with Devin Harris coming off the bench. It's not good news when your starting young point guard has an ankle injury. I don't know if they hold him out for very long. We'll have to see what the extent of the injury is. Moving on, Bruce Arena resigned this morning from the U.S. men's national team. It had to happen. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. I was surprised it didn't happen quicker, but it's not a surprise at all that this is happening. I think that they've got to move on. They've got to clear house. I think, you can keep some of these younger players, anybody under 25, like I talked about before, but the older players need to go. We need to, start over. We've got plenty of time until the next World Cup, until the next Olympics to get things going again with the U.S. men's national team. And they've got to have a youth movement. They've got to bring some of these players in, find more Christian Pulisic's, find more Kellen Acasas, and bring up some of these younger players, especially guys who are playing overseas. We have quite a few young players playing overseas that are playing really well, starting at major clubs. Ethan Horvel at Club Bruges. Their starting goalkeeper, that is not a small club. They're in the Champions League. So Horvath. Wouldn't be surprised to see him come over and play a little goalkeeper. UNC avoided major sanctions this morning in their academic fraud case. Greg Sankey, I'm going to read this off in this quote. The information available in the record did not establish that the courses were solely created, offered, and maintained as an orchestrated effort to benefit student athletes. What this is saying is basically they were letting everybody cheat, so we can't say they specifically let the athletes cheat. Okay, the athletes the program was cheating on behalf of the athletes along with everybody else in the school. This is more of a cleaning up for the school program in and of itself. UNC doesn't just have issues in one place. They've got issues all around in a lot of their sports programs. And this isn't just at UNC either. Don't fool yourself thinking this is only UNC. There are a lot of programs around the country that are doing similar things. I wouldn't be surprised to hear of other schools coming into the news with academic issues with student athletes. And I think, with what's happened with Adidas, Louisville, and other schools associated with Adidas and what happened there, I wouldn't be surprised if we just hear some of this stuff really explode over the next 6 months. Obviously, these things take years to figure out what's going on. The UNC piece actually came out about a year and a half ago, kind of the initial tidbits of it, and they finally ruled on it. I think it's unfortunate. I think these are places where we really need to cut down on what schools are providing to student athletes in terms of ease of courses, letting them, write a paper to be their class grade, not really grading these kids on the right system. It's a mess. And part of it is with these huge Division I schools, these kids aren't really students. Let's be real. They are amateur in only name. They are professional players. They're spending 1 year at these schools, especially at UNC, Kentucky, some of these programs where they go, they play 1 year, and they're off playing professional sports. This is part of what's happened, especially in basketball, because of the instituted 1 year at college. Football hasn't happened as much. Obviously, with basketball, you see some of these kids, LeBron, come right out of high school, and they can play at the level of the NBA. Well, that does it for today. Next week, we got a lot more football talk. We'll have an update on the Ezekiel Elliott case. Hopefully, we'll have an update on Dennis Smith Jr. We'll have Dwayne Price in, and we'll get Matt Wixon in again. It's football season.